Okay, I've got 7 o'clock, so let's get started. A few announcements before we begin class. The men's fall golf retreat will be September the 13th through the 15th. And men, if you didn't sign up, the deadline's passed. If you need any information, Adam Prestridge is the contact person. Backpack Buddies will be, there'll be a special meeting on Sunday, August 18th. There'll be no classes that day. There'll be a breakfast, and the kids will meet their backpack buddy on that day. Caroline said she still needs 4. That's down from the 50 we started with, so everybody's really responded well. But we still need 4, and this is time for adults to work with our kids and be a mentor to them. And Peyton and Mackenzie Cole are moving back, and we're thrilled about that. He's completing his deployment. They're moving in August 24th and could use some help moving furniture and lifting and things like that. The summer's ice cream social will be Wednesday, August the 28th. There won't be any classes. That's our usual singing for the last Wednesday night of each quarter. And remember, Micah Brinkley will be here September the 15th to pick up the coin banks. Those who have had surgery, we mentioned Yvonne Steinball had total joint surgery. Gary Lewis is recovering from his surgery. And Mike Hughes thanks everyone who prayed for his brother, who's now in rehab following his heart surgery. And Jim Busby is recovering. He's rehab, Tracy? He's in rehab. And visitors or calls or cards are welcome. And then Chris Van Winkle's dad, David, will have his surgery this coming Friday the 9th. And of course, we need to remember there are several who are struggling with health. The Ellises, Pam Lewis, Gail Jenkins, Joel Gray, Sister Simmons, and Marie Haggard. We all need to be mindful of them. Esther, the book of Esther. The first part of the class, I'm going to move real quick. I think it's important to get the background. And one of the questions I want you to think about is, when did God start intervening? As I read the book, to me it's obvious that there was some intervention on God's part. However that happened, I think similar to the way the Spirit moved Cyrus to let the Jews go home, something along that line. But there's no miracle or anything like that. And of course, you've heard 1,000 times that God is not mentioned in the book. His name is not mentioned. But this is a story about Mordecai and Esther, because he did a lot of praying in this book also. Everything took place outside of Israel. And these are the Jews who chose not to go home when Cyrus gave them permission to go home. And this is a story there. This is a huge empire. It stretches from India all the way down into Ethiopia and in the African continent down into Ethiopia. It includes Egypt and includes all of what we call today the Holy Land, Palestine, all the way up to Turkey. It's huge. And Kyle and Delitzsch, in his commentary, his estimate is there were 100 million people living in that kingdom. So huge. The United States of America's population is 300 million, to kind of give you perspective, but we know that people didn't live as long back then due to diseases, and a lot of children died in childbirth. Of those, he estimates there's about 2 to 3 million Jews who've remained in who are total in the kingdom. He didn't break it out who was in Israel at this time. Not 2 to 3 million, I can assure you. Ezra and Nehemiah give some counts of that. So anyway, we got to move quick because I think the background is really important here. And I want you to be thinking, when do you think God is stepping in or influencing or putting his foot on the scale just a little bit to make things happen? It all starts out with a drunk fool. He's acting a fool. He's having a big feast. He's got to get ready to go to war. And so he's getting everybody fired up. And Truth for Today commentary thinks that this feast lasted 6 months. 6 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. But you got to think that it's a huge kingdom. You got to take time. Everybody's got, if they're going to travel for a month to get there, they want to make it worth their while to have, if they're going to have a party. But anyway, he's prideful, he's arrogant, and so then he decides in the middle of all this feast that, well, all these drunken men, he wants his queen to come in here and show everybody how pretty she is. Ladies, what woman in her right mind would want to go in and show herself off in front of a room full of drunks? I mean, seriously. No woman in her right mind would go for that. And she refused. Good for her. Some commenters think that he wanted her to come in there without any clothes on. Even worse. But the kings of this time period, there's not much good that you can say about them. They had absolute power, and we all know the story about absolute power. It corrupts absolutely. And he wanted what he wanted, and he was with his buddies and trying to show himself off. She refused. And so then, now there's panic in the court. As you can follow along on your handout or on your tablet. She's defied the king. He just didn't do that. He didn't tell the king no. One commenter quotes Josephus as saying, messages went back and forth because she was having her feast with the ladies in another part of the palace, and messages went back 4 or 5 times, and she keeps saying no. And they're not speaking directly to each other. This is all through the eunuchs who are probably carrying these messages back and forth. So I kind of, it's probably pretty tense. She's lucky, I guess you could say that he just didn't have her killed. That's what kings did. You tell the king no, he kills you. They just didn't tolerate it. Some think that she was actually pregnant with his heir, and that's why she wasn't executed. We don't know. It's just a guess. So then they decide, these men, women didn't have great standing then. Men decide, you know what? We can't have this because the queen said no. All the women in the realm, they're going to start saying no. We can't have that. And so they send a letter out and saying, the man is the master of the house. I mean, got to get it out there. We can't have this, women speaking their mind. And so they send a letter out. To me, it just emphasizes how dumb they are. I mean, if she didn't listen to the king's command, I doubt anybody's going to listen to a letter that's just delivered by somebody. But anyway, we don't, all the details of this. The politics of what's going on at this time, he's getting ready to go to war against Greece. Probably every one of us have heard the story of the 300 Spartans who took on the Persian army and held the army up so that Greece could get ready. This is that time period. And you probably saw the movie, read the books or whatever about it. They eventually lost, but it gave the Greeks enough time to build up their resistance. The Greeks had a navy of 1,400 ships. They defeated a navy of 3,800 ships, of 380 ships. His navy, I got it wrong. 380 Greek ships defeated 1,400 Persian ships. So I guess you might say he's not really a good general or a good leader. Some estimate that his army numbered about 1 million men that he sent against Greece. We don't know. He certainly had the resources to accumulate that many people. Because of these defeats, supposedly, he went back and just had a wild orgy back in his palace just to console himself. But we're not sure about that. But to show you how he's basically, to me, he's insane. One of the bridges didn't hold up. And so he had all the guys who built the bridge, he had them executed. Because there was a storm that interfered with his navy, he had his servants get out there with whips and whip the ocean. And then he had them tie anchors onto chains and throw them in the ocean to anchor the ocean. Okay. So you see the guys, he's not right. He's not right. I mean, Adam Clarke said he was an idiot. Now, commenters back in the 1800s didn't polish their language like we are accustomed in modern times. He just said the guy's an idiot. And I agree. So they decide he's deposed the queen because she said no, so he got rid of her, so he's got to get a new queen. He can't rule a kingdom. So they call for, in chapter 2, they call for all the pretty girls. And of course, they have to be beautiful. They have to be. He's the king. He's got to have someone beautiful on his arm to sit on the throne next to him. And so Esther is gathered up with that bunch. And face it, if she had not been young and beautiful, she wouldn't have been selected. That's just the way it went. He had to have beautiful women. And so from 100 million people in his realm, he sent out and said, I want all the pretty girls to come to the palace and audition, is the word I'm putting on it, to be queen. Esther was one of those. So Esther gets moved to the head of the class because she found favor with the eunuch. Is God intervening? Is he beginning to influence things? We're not told. It doesn't say. Do what? That's what it said. That's what it said. I would say she's probably drop dead gorgeous, or she wouldn't have been selected. I mean, let's get real. This is a lustful, evil man. He's not going to have somebody that is not attractive on the throne next to him. There is not one nice thing I can say about this king. Let's just, get that out of the way. There's not anything nice I can say about this guy. So anyway, she's in the process. She gets selected to be the queen. Said, for whatever happened, whatever occurred the night that she spent with him, we are not told, but she was chosen to be queen. This is 4 years after Vashti was deposed, so there's been a 4-year interval. And if you read the account, each girl went through 1 year of beauty treatments. I don't know what you can do for a year, but anyway, she did. And all the girls did that. And if you weren't selected to be queen, you went into the harem, and there you stayed for the rest of your life. Now, Kaufman had nothing nice to say about any of this. Truth for Today commentary did mention, he says, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, there may have been a lot of girls in the realm that say, okay, one night with him and I get to live in the palace for the rest of my life, or I get to live in squalor out in the kingdom. There may have been some girls that looked at that and says, okay, that's not a bad trade. But it's just, these are times and cultures that are so foreign to us, we can't even conceive of this. And we got to keep that in mind when we're going. We are not used to a despot who just does what he wants. I mean, some of us have a lot of opinions about different leaders and presidents that we've had over the years, but nobody to this level. We can get things under control as a nation. We can vote and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so she's named queen. The next thing that happens in the next part is there is a plot against the king. Mordecai exposes that plot. So pieces, as you step back and look at this, pieces are falling into place where Esther and Mordecai, 2 Jews, are really being elevated to a very high and influential place in the kingdom. And that's going to become important later on. And again, we're talking about a 4-year period here. So then you've got Haman in chapter 3. He hates the Jews. He's an Agagite, probably a descendant of the Amalekites. Who are the Amalekites? What was supposed to happen to the Amalekites? They were supposed to be destroyed. That's what got Saul in trouble. He didn't do it. That's what cost him the kingdom. And Moses reminded Israel, Samuel reminded King Saul, and they didn't do it. So here we're dealing with an Amalekite. And I've given you some scripture references. So It's very possible that Haman knew this, being a descendant of the Amalekites, that he knew this, but he hated Haman because Haman didn't treat him with the respect that he thought he should. So he hatches a plan. He hatches a plan that he's not only going to kill Mordecai, he's going to kill as many Jews as he can see to it that people get their hands on. So he makes his plan. Now think about this. In the first month of the year, of this year that he's doing this, which is the 12th year of the reign of Ahasuerus, first month he casts lots to determine the month that they're going to kill all the Jews. The lots fall on the 12th month, a full 12 months ahead. Why wasn't it 6 months? Why wasn't it 3 months? Get things done more quickly. Did God influence how the lots fell? But remember, it's a large kingdom. Some estimate that it took, when they had a system similar to the Pony Express. There are estimates that it took about 30 days. If he wrote an edict and decided get it spread out across my kingdom, that it would take approximately 30 days for the message just to get to each location. Then you got to disseminate it in that particular location. So 30, 45 days to get the message. It's not like, they didn't have anything electronic. So it took time. But this time is going to work into the favor of the Jews. So now there's a nation in turmoil. There's some people going, why in chapter 4? What's going on? Mordecai's upset. The Jews hadn't caused any trouble. In fact, Cyrus, before this king, had said he had given them military support. He had funded the building of the walls around Jerusalem. He'd helped fund the building of the temple. He gave military support to make sure they could get that done. And now a decision has been made to execute the Jews. So he goes in the morning. The first couple of verses talks about that he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and wailed loudly and bitterly. And he went as far as the king's gate. And so Esther's sitting in the palace. She doesn't know what's going on, but someone comes and tells her. It's very apparent that Esther has a lot of support among the king's staff because they went and told her. And you're going to see more of this later on. They came and told her. So she wanted to know what was going on. So she went to find out. She sent people to find out. It's interesting to me, the communication between Mordecai and Esther was not direct. They were sending messengers back and forth. And so there were people that they trusted to carry the message accurately to Esther and back to Mordecai. There were people that she trusted. And it goes back to how she found favor when she was one of the girls that was selected to audition to be queen. So he said he sent a copy of the edict in verse 8 of chapter 4. And so he said in verse 8, you need to go to the king. You got to go tell him what's going on. We can't allow this, and ask him to stop. Again, in the latter part of the next few verses, you see that even as queen, supposedly his numero uno, she cannot walk in and tell him that we need to talk. Can you imagine any woman in the Western world that would accept that kind of structure in their household? I don't know of any woman that would tolerate that. Yeah, try it, guys, and you let me know how that works for you. You say, no, you've got to get permission to come down. What do you two say? So anyway, here we are. And again, it shows the status of women. This is ridiculous. But anyway, again, it's a culture we don't understand, we're not familiar with, but it is what it is. And so Esther sends that message back. I can't just walk in there and talk to him. I can't do that. He's not called for me. And so these 1 to 2 million Jews are their future is between Esther, who can't even go talk to her husband. And the only one he's listening to right now is Haman. So anyway, so the famous part of Esther is coming up in verses 13, 14 through 17. And he says, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come from another place. But do you know whether or not you've come to this position for such a time as this? So she says, go assemble the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, and I and my maidens will also fast in the same way. And if I perish, I perish. Who all's prayed already here? All the Jews in Susa, which is the capital. Esther and all of her maidens. She's got a whole staff. She's the queen. She's got probably 10 or 15 people that are at her beck and call. All of them are at her beck and call, just not her husband, right? But she's got all these 10 or 15 maidens and eunuchs who will do her bidding. She just can't go talk to her husband. But anyway, so there it is. This fasting business in the Old Testament is always associated with praying. This is how they prayed. And this is what I really want to get to, this fasting and praying that they did for 3 days, 3 solid days. I've given you some examples in Ezra and his fasting and how he called Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles 20, and Daniel did the same thing. And in Acts, when they appointed elders, they fasted and prayed over that decision, the elders that were appointed. This is what, it doesn't say pray here, but this is what happens when the Jews are fasting, is they are praying. They are, whatever is going on in their life, either they're upset or they're making a request, but there's prayer. Fasting is associated with prayer, or prayer is associated with fasting, however you want to put it. But again, think about all the pieces that are falling into place here. And Esther and Mordecai are doing their part. Okay, so she does go to the king, and he agrees to let her come in. Isn't that nice, ladies, that he agreed to talk to her? The Septuagint puts this romantic twist on this, that when he spoke to her, she almost fainted, and he kissed her gently on the cheek. And yeah, do you need a bag to? Yeah. I mean, give me a break here. I mean, the choice was he's going to kill her or let her speak. I mean, this is not some romantic thing going on here. So anyway, she agrees he agrees to talk to her, and she just wants, he says, whatever you want, up to half of my kingdom. At that point, she could have said, well, okay, I'll take this half. This half with all the Jews, and we'll go on no matter what. But anyway, so she said, I just want y'all to come to a banquet. That's all I want. So they have a banquet. And there's lots of wine, lots of drinking, just like there was when he got himself in trouble the first time. And so then at the end of that banquet, he says, what did you want? She says, I want you to come back for another banquet tomorrow. And she invited Haman. The very person who is causing all of this trouble. So anyway, so Haman, he's ecstatic, he's thrilled, he goes back, he's bragging to his family, telling everybody how great he is and how wonderful. And he says, but that Jew, Mordecai, I am sick to death of him and his family. He says, well, build a gallows and just tell the king tomorrow when you go to the banquet, I want to hang that guy. And he says, that sounds like a good idea. So he has that. Except that night, the king can't sleep. He just can't sleep. He's had a big feast, lots of drinking, but he can't sleep. So he asked for the books to be brought to him. And there's the story of Mordecai revealing the plot against his life. So is God intervening? Is God answering prayers? Because there's the story, and the king says, we got to do something for this guy. So the next morning he says, we got to do something for him. And he says, who's out in the court? Haman's in the court. He's there early because he's there to ask to execute Mordecai. He says, send him in here. And so the king says, there is somebody, I'm paraphrasing like crazy here, y'all. There is somebody I want to give huge honor. And Haman thinks, well, who else but me? I mean, he's got the king's signet ring. He's got all this order. And he's thinking, put him on one of your horses and wear him one of his robes. And he says, you know what? That sounds like a great idea. Do that for Mordecai. He's devastated. He's devastated. And now he's got to go to another feast, another banquet. And so he goes home, tells his wife what happened. She says, I don't know what's, I can't kill this guy. I can't, what am I going to do now? I've paraded him around. And think about this. All of the people who are friends of Esther have seen this. And y'all have worked in big organizations. You know the water cabinet gossip. Do you know what happened? Everybody's talking about it. The eunuchs and the maids who are on Esther's side, everybody's knowing about this. This is not done in secret. So there's another banquet. More drinking. Lots of drinking. They love their wine. And so King says, you got to tell me what you want. So she tells him, my people have been sold for destruction. Well, who would do such a thing, the king says? That guy at the other end of the table, Haman. The king is furious. He is furious. The Bible says that the words covered Haman's face. It sounds bad. I don't know exactly what that means, but it doesn't sound good, does it? There are lots of times in the Bible where God disturbed sleep to get messages across, and I listed several there for you. So now what? Haman's terrified. The king is furious, and he storms out, and he leaves. Haman, probably half drunk, stumbles over to beg Esther for mercy, and he falls on top of her just when the king walks back in. You got a furious monarch. Will you assault the queen in the palace? Isn't it nice that the eunuch said, by the way, there is a gallows over here that Haman had erected, so why don't you use it to hang this guy? I mean, obviously this eunuch likes Esther, or just he hates Haman. Who knows? He says, that sounds like a good idea. Do it. And so tables have turned. But you think about all these steps. Now, when did God start intervening? Or even before, maybe? Don't know. Yes?
I think he had been there from the beginning of Esther's life because she was brought up by her uncle, not her parents.
They had died.
He had taught her from the very beginning what to do and what the laws did.
Even to the point of telling her, don't tell anybody you're a Jew. Yeah, it's hard to put, but yes, I mean, she could have been just one more orphan out on the street, but instead, she was taken in by Mordecai and his family to be cared for and raised up and taught. And so, yes, Debbie. Well, she was born gorgeous. And let's face it, she wouldn't have been in the palace had she not been gorgeous. Do what? Well, that's a good point too. When was he not? And yes, now I want to get to Esther and Mordecai's part. They did a lot of praying, a lot, 3 days worth of praying and fasting and thinking. What did Esther do after that prayer? After all of that praying, what did she do? Did she just say, God's going to take care of it? It's done. I don't have to worry anymore. She had a plan. She started thinking about how to manipulate this situation. And let's face it, it was manipulation. You can't just go in and conk him on the head and say, listen, because he's not listening. He has to be persuaded, manipulated, whatever, however you want to do it.
You're talking about the king is not listening.
Pardon?
You're talking about the king is not listening.
The only one he's listening to up to this point is Haman. Yeah. So she's got to get it on his good side, I guess you might say. So one of the things I want us to get out of this is Esther and Mordecai, they did their part. Mordecai said, if you don't do it, he's going to provide for the Jews somehow, some way. He had that faith. But they did their part. So to me, one of the big lessons here is pray, study, whatever, but we have to do our part. God's not going to, he put these people were in this place where they could do the most influence, the most good for God's people. One of the things we have to understand is Israel, besides the 1 to 2 million Jews scattered all through, Israel is in this kingdom. If Haman's plan had come to be, what would have happened to the lineage of the Messiah? It would have been in jeopardy. What? But here's a problem with that. He's been putting things in place for a long time. The lineage of the Messiah is in real jeopardy here because all of these, who knows? We don't know how many Jews would have lost their lives in all this. But God's putting in place a plan. But Mordecai and Esther were doing their part. And, in spite of how crazy this king is, Mordecai was loyal to the king. When he heard about a conspiracy, he reported it, and those men were executed. He could have said, this guy's nuts. This guy is nuts. I think we ought to just let it happen. But he didn't. One of the lessons for us as Christians is we are to be loyal to our government, whatever that is. We are not out there on the barricades trying to overthrow the government. We live our day-to-day lives, and Paul and Peter taught, you pray for the leaders, you wish the best for them, and Mordecai's living that. And that's part of what made him so great and why he was listened to. And so when he spoke and when things happened, he had friends, he had people that cared about him. So was she aware of her limitations in the things that she did?
Yes, she knew,
Charles.
She knew that going to the king was against the law, and she could be killed. So she put it right in mind.
Okay. So what does the account say that she did? She got up, she put on her royal robes, she walked in there looking like the queen, like somebody. So she got all dressed up. And so when she came to the side and hoped for his response, she looked like someone who was important because she was, but she was the queen. And so she did her part. So she prepared, she manipulated, she did what she needed to do to make things happen, to get the king's attention. She was aware of her limitations, Debbie. Yes. And Oh, absolutely. There, exactly. In chapter 8, verse 5, here's how she worded this request. If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before him, and the matter seems proper to the king, and I am pleasing in his sight, let it be written. She approached him with all humility. It's all about you. Now, why didn't she blame the king when she said Haman? Why didn't she say, and you let him do it? Why did she not blame the king? Pardon? He was deceived. He is the king. Absolutely. It would have not have done her any favors to say, and you let this guy trick you into this. Wouldn't have helped her cause at all. And so as I look at Mordecai and Esther, they were doing their part. They were being righteous people in the decisions in life that they made. You know, that culture we don't have a clue to. It is beyond me to think that a guy could just say, send all the pretty women to me and I'm going to try them out and see if I want one of them to be my queen. That's unheard of for us. She didn't have a choice. She's brought in. Yeah. I mean, think about Mordecai. I mean, what he told her, he said, don't tell anybody who you are. Do not tell anybody. He gave her good advice. And so she dealt, and so what I see of these, they dealt with the situation that they had. The two of them are not going to overthrow the realm by themselves. They are not going to stop the king. They can't walk in there. He's got 50 armed guards around him. They're not going to walk in there and kick him off the throne and take over. It's not going to happen. They worked within the situation. They prayed and they asked and they pleaded and they begged for 3 days. But they turned around and did their part with the situation that they had. We don't always have the situation that we want. And so we have to, she figured it out. Mordecai figured it out. And so sometimes we have to figure it out and pray and ask and plead just like they did. To me, this is a great example of all of that. Do you think planning the second banquet helped her cause? Debbie says yes. Anybody else want to weigh in? What do you think that did? Built suspense and anticipation. As far as both of them were concerned. They had this big feast that she prepared. Let me tell you, I'm sure she had every person on her staff working on that feast to make sure it went off like clockwork. And so, Debbie? I mean, he went home and told his wife and everything, didn't he? He said, I was the only one invited by Queen Esther. And I get to go back tomorrow. Pardon?
There would also be some drinking.
Absolutely. They like Chad. Mm-hmm. Right. She had to be.
She knew how to survive being the queen of this crazy king. You know, she'd done that for a while at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that's part of what impresses me about her is just how she handled herself and how she came up with a good way to approach the king on this situation.
Absolutely. Claudia?
And she allowed time for the king, you know, what is this thing she wants? You know, more time, and it must be something really, something that she's going to all this trouble.
Built up.
Mordecai put his plan out, but I think she knew him, and she knew he
Yeah. It must be really something. She's doing another feast tomorrow. Wow, you know, it builds anticipation. And so I'm sure his mind is running wild. So think about think about the timing here. Vashti was deposed in the 3rd year of his reign. She's made queen in the 7th year of his reign, so there's that 4-year period there. The lots that are cast are in the 12th year of his reign. So she's had from the 7th to the 12th year, 5 years, to show everyone her character, her true person. And so she's had that time to build relationships with all the people in the palace. And obviously, she showed herself to be a true and gracious person. The lots cast are important too.
Did she really?
Did she really what?
I think Esther gets way, way, way too much credit. I think it's all Mordecai.
I
I think Esther just rocked along and did what, thank goodness, did what Mordecai told.
I think that Mordecai's role is underappreciated throughout all of this. It's obvious that the eunuchs and her maidens were loyal to her. However she achieved that, they were loyal to her. They carried the messages back and forth. The problem I have with the commenters and things is I think that Mordecai is underappreciated in the things that he did, because he's the one that raised her. He's the one that guided her and counseled her through all of this. And
He was praying and fasting and mourning long before she was.
yes, well, I don't know how long, but the Jews and all were fasting and mourning. Chad?
I actually agree with parts of both of what you all are saying. I think Mordecai definitely is underappreciated and had a lot to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we would say Esther had nothing to do with it. She's the one that planned the banquets and how to approach the king about it. You know, we don't have any record of Mordecai telling her how to approach that. He said you need to get it done somehow.
Yeah, I don't know how to do what. Yes. Now think about this also. The lots were cast on the first month, and the execution was to occur on the 12th month of that year. Haman is killed on the 3rd month, so that left the remaining 9 months for a new plan to get put in place, for Mordecai to get in charge, for all of this to happen, because then the Jews were allowed to defend themselves. And the Bible says that God put the fear of the Jews in the people. He put the fear of Mordecai in the people, because he now had the signet ring. He now was second in command. And so this timing and how this works out, again, was God manipulating this situation? Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. Did God respond directly to their prayers? Did he
Was it instantaneously?
do what?
You mean instantaneously?
Well, I'm not sure how to put this, but did he directly make these things happen, or did he use the people on the ground to do things, to whatever they did? There wasn't any miracle. Pardon?
Pretty much he used the people. But I got a question.
Sure.
How did Haman think he could win? The king's wife is a Jew.
He didn't know she was a Jew.
Mordecai was a Jew.
He didn't know, but remember, he did not know. He didn't know that Esther was a Jew. He knew Mordecai was a Jew, but he didn't know that Esther was. Yeah. And the reason I asked this question, it's hard to say what's direct. It wasn't like, Moses standing on the mountain and parting the Red Sea. It wasn't anything like that. But everything is kind of behind the scenes, and little nuances and intrigue in the palace and things like that? Did you have a chance?
He put the right people in the right place
Yes,
at the right time.
exactly.
Do we know what they specifically prayed for?
We don't.
Or whether or not it did directly, we don't even know what they specifically prayed for. Wouldn't Esther have also been fairly young to be a maiden and a virgin?
Oh yeah, she would.
She would have been maybe even
He wouldn't have had her if she wasn't young. She wouldn't have been there.
that too, but that
Yeah.
also goes to Mordecai when she was brought up correctly, but she definitely had to do the Queen Lady, but it still had to be harsh, she had to be young.
Yes, exactly. Didn't perform any miracles. He used the. And here's a question that I had for myself that I can't. Did she just pray that she wouldn't get killed when she went in to see the king? Was that her own? Was that all she asked for? I mean, it would have been heavy on my mind.
Well, if the maidens didn't know she was a Jew, they would be praying for her not to be killed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't want another queen. Here's something interesting historically. Most of the commenters think that at some point later on she was deposed and that Vashti was put back in as queen. The reason being is she gave birth to his heir. And so it would look funny if he's married or the queen is not the one who gave birth to his heir. And that's speculation on their part. But that Esther is only on the scene for just this short period of time. That's not provable with the information that we have right now. So she may have. She may have. And don't put it past the leadership of that time to lie about it. I mean, she might have had his heir and he just said, no, it's Vashti. Listen, these guys lied to cover their tracks all the time. This was not, there wasn't a free press to call them on and say, wait a minute, didn't you say 6 months ago? There wasn't any of that. Anyway, the lesson is yours. Next week will be when God says no. Paul's request. I appreciate the comments and thoughts that everyone has shared. It's been a good conversation. Thank you.